Hello and welcome to Lecture 1 in the course English 2400, Writing in the Public Sphere. My name is Dr. Thomas Gershon. I'm a professor in the English department here at Cal State San Bernardino, and I've been here since 2019, so this is, I guess, about my fifth year. I think I'll be starting my sixth year here this fall. I moved here from upstate New York, where I was there a professor at Ithaca College. So this is lecture 1. This is the first lecture in the series, and it's really just meant to kind of introduce the class and introduce the specific scope. When we say writing in the public sphere, we're talking about a specific space in which writing occurs, right? We can think about all the different kinds of writing that we do, and if we understand that writing is meant to accomplish some kind of task, the spaces in which those tasks are being accomplished kind of dictates the kind of writing we're talking about. So when we talk about writing in the public sphere, we're talking about writing that's meant to accomplish some sort of public tasks that are in the interest of the many, in the interest of the public, as opposed to your sort of personal interests. Or another realm of rhetoric is the technical sphere. So that's like your interest as like a scholar or a lawyer or any other kind of specific professional sphere. So you have the personal sphere, those are your own sort of self-interests. The technical sphere, that's the kind of specialized or professional interests, and then the public sphere, that's the sphere of the common good. And when we talk about writing in the public sphere, we really are talking about argumentation, because it's through argumentation that work in the public sphere gets done. So this first lecture is just going to sort of introduce what I mean when I use the word argumentation. So argumentation's influences. Argumentation comes from 3 distinct traditions: rhetoric, dialectic, and logic. I'm going to spend the next slide, I'm going to get into more depth on rhetoric, so I just want to briefly talk about dialectic and logic here. Dialectic is a pretty big field in philosophy. It influences rhetoric. It goes all the way back. The distinction between rhetoric and dialectic goes all the way back to Plato, at least, or at least Plato, and then Aristotle are the ones that really sort of begin this Western, in the Western tradition, this conversation about the distinctions between rhetoric and dialectic. But in the sense of how we are looking at it in this course, or the influences of dialectic on argumentation borrows from dialectic the idea of multiple ideas, multiple people, multiple influences engaging with one another. So dialectic, very simply put, for our purposes, is the processes through which things and ideas influence one another. How do things migrate? How do ideas migrate? How do ideas impact other ideas? And really the principle that we borrow from dialectic most in argumentation is cooperation, right? The assumption of dialectic is that you cannot single-handedly make change, right? That change always operates through multiple perspectives engaging with one another. So dialectic, argumentation borrows from dialectic the idea of cooperation. It's a cooperative enterprise. And then logic, I'll say briefly about logic on this slide as well. Logic, you may have come across logic in a lot of different contexts. Maybe in a math class you talk about logic, and there is sort of a mathematical version of logic. That's the kind of logic that you might see, different mathematical principles like the distributive principle and that sort of thing. That comes from mathematical logic. But there's also what's known as informal logic. And that's the kind of logic that we draw on in argumentation. So formal logic, we'll talk a little bit about formal logic in the next module. But informal logic is really the basis of argumentation. And informal logic differs primarily from formal logic in that in informal logic, the conclusions do not follow with certainty from the premises. In formal logic, if you have a certain set of premises, if the premises are true, the conclusion must be true. So the conclusion follows with certainty from the premises. In informal logic, you never have that certainty. You have only some degree of probability. And that's really what we have when we talk about argumentation. We don't have certainty, we have probability. We'll talk more about that in subsequent lectures as well. So a little bit more now on that first bullet on the last slide, rhetoric. Argumentation and rhetoric kind of both have some negative connotations. When it comes to rhetoric, the negative connotations of rhetoric go all the way back to Plato, who in some of his dialogues took a skeptical approach to rhetoric. It's the idea that rhetoric is associated with deception or emptiness, or it's sort of like putting a pretty face on something that might not be beneficial overall. That goes back to one of Plato's dialogues called the Gorgias dialogue, and that's been taken up in a lot of scholarly approaches, but also popular approaches when we talk about things like empty rhetoric, right? Or that's just rhetoric. That's kind of picking up on the view of rhetoric as sort of just empty gestures, or making things appear good even when they're not. But the traditional concerns of rhetoric have really been about how people develop and communicate knowledge. It's the study of how knowledge is created and shared. It's often called the art of persuasion. That also sometimes has a sort of individualistic kind of tint to it. Aristotle, on the other hand, and that comes, I think, that's sort of a really oversimplification of Aristotle's definition of rhetoric and the art of rhetoric, which is the discovery of the means of persuasion in any given situation. In other words, it's not about how to persuade. It's discovering how persuasion operates in any given situation. And that's maybe a subtle difference, but a very important one. And then persuasion, large rhetoric, has the three appeals. You may be familiar with these as well, right? The most common appeals. This also comes from Aristotle. Ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos, of course, is a appeal to character or culture. Pathos is appeal to emotion or the feelings of the crowd, right? The feelings of your audience. And then logos is the appeal to logic or structure, and that can be that sort of formal logic that we talked about, but especially the informal logic that we'll talk about more. So this is important for the purposes of this course, primarily to make a distinction between persuasion and argumentation. Persuasion and argumentation are not the same thing. In other words, we can engage in persuasion and still not be involved in argumentation. Like rhetoric, argumentation can also have unfavorable connotations, mostly from the term argument, right? Like we're having an argument, or why are you being so argumentative? It can be seen as like quarrelsome or unhealthy, like we argue a lot, combative. But again, if you look at the sort of scholarly definition, like rhetoric, arguing is really just reason giving. Right? So if we want to, if we think about, I'm going to introduce some more definitions here. Arguing is reason giving. When we argue, we give reasons for accepting some sort of statement or some sort of claim. So for example, I might make the claim, unmanned drones are an ethical and effective way to wage war. That's a claim. And then if somebody says, oh, why do you say that? Or I don't think so. Then I can provide reasons, right? The technical term for that in argumentation is evidence. I can start to provide reasons for my claims. Same thing with a statement like climate change can be overcome by conservation alone. I would have to then provide reasons. Or changes in gender roles over the last generation are on balance an improvement. Again, these are claims, these are statements, and then I can provide reasons for those statements. So in a nutshell, boiled down, arguing is the practice of justifying claims, right? We give reasons or justifications for the claims that we make. So why is this a good thing? Well, because the alternative is to accept or reject claims without any discussion, without any analysis, right? We have only our beliefs, and one belief is just as good as another, and everybody is entitled to their own opinions, and we have no collective idea of what a better decision is or a worse decision is. We really are left without a logical way or a reasonable way to determine what the best outcome is in any given situation. So this idea of arguing as reason giving or arguing as reasoning is central to a lot of what we do in the public sphere. So given that definition, an argument is a statement supported by a reason. Which of the following is an argument? And you'll want to consider the distinction that I just introduced on the previous couple slides between claim and argument. So, which of the following is an argument? And there's going to be more than one that's an argument. So the first one, there were 2 shooters involved in the JFK assassination because it isn't possible for so many shots to be fired so quickly. 2, my favorite color is blue. 3, Russia is a great threat to U.S. security. 4, and this is said by somebody pointing a gun at another person, give me your wallet or I'll shoot. 5, let me borrow your car. I need to go to work. 6, raising taxes on the wealthiest Americans actually is bad for the middle class because it slows job creation. I feel like I should say that these are just statements that I'm putting out there as possibilities and not necessarily reflective of my own view. And then finally, the fact that Taylor Swift is the only artist to have won the Grammy Award for Album of the Year 4 times shows that she is one of the greatest musicians of all time. So think about those, and we'll go over the answers on the next slide. So which of the following is an argument? There were 2 shooters involved in the JFK assassination because it isn't possible for so many shots to be fired so quickly. Is that an argument? I say yes. It is an argument because it's a statement followed by a reason. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. It's an argument being made. How about the next one? My favorite color is blue. Is that an argument? No, right? There's no reason that's being given. Same thing with the next one. No reason, right? It could be a claim, but not an argument. Give me your wallet or I'll shoot. Is that an argument? Well, it does seem to imply a reason, right? But it's not an argument because that reason isn't something that you can really disagree with. It's not the start of an exchange of ideas or an exchange of reasons. It's the use of force, and we'll talk more about the distinction between argumentation and force in later classes. How about the next one? Let me borrow your car. I need to go to work. Is that an argument? I say yes. It is an argument. You're making a statement, or in this case, making a request, but providing a reason for it. Somebody can reasonably agree or disagree with what you're saying. Same thing with the next one. Raising taxes on the wealthiest Americans actually is bad for the middle class because it slows job creation. And the last one as well. Again, these are statements that I'm providing and reasons for supporting those statements. I went kind of quickly over the second one. My favorite color is blue. There's no reason there, but it's also not something you could really argue about. And we'll talk about that in a later class. So let's talk a little bit more about the scope of the course. We talked a little bit on the previous slides of what an argument is, right? An argument is providing a claim, providing reasons to accept a claim. Argumentation is the study of effective reasons. So if we say arguing is reasoning, argumentation is the study of effective reasoning. And when we introduce that word effective, that implies another realm of argumentation that we'll talk more about, which is if we say effective, well, effective for whom? So implicit in the word of effective reasoning, already in that definition of argumentation, is the notion of audience. When we say that argumentation is the study of effective reasoning, we're saying effective for a particular audience. We want the audience to accept, whether that audience is ourselves, which I say in that bullet point a little further down, or our best friend, or our sibling, or Congress, or your classmates, or whatever that audience is. When we say we're engaging in argumentation, we want that to be the willing acceptance of our audience. In other words, we want them to accept what we're saying because of the reasons we give and not for any other influence or for any other factor. So that's why when we go back to that first idea or that idea on the previous slide of give me your wallet or I'll shoot, that's not a willing acceptance of a claim, right? That's the introduction of coercion or force. So a simple definition of arguing then is giving reasons to justify claims seeking the assent of an audience. And argumentation is the study of that process, right? Which is going to be effective or not effective in different situations. And as the course goes on, we will continue to kind of play out that distinction between argumentation, the field, right? This study, that field that studies argument as a process. In other words, how do we engage in argument as something that evolves or plays out over time, and then argument as a product, right? We can talk about, oh, that argument is a good argument, or that argument is a bad argument, or that argument, succeeds for these reasons or doesn't, and so on and so forth. So argument is something, right? If we think about just argument as providing reasons for claims for the purpose of the willing assent of an audience, that's something we do all the time, right? Like we get together with friends and we have differences of opinion, whether it's about politics or just like where to go to lunch, right? And we'll often give reasons, right? We rarely want to use force with friends, right? We rarely want to use force. We want it, that cooperative element comes into play. And so if it's something we engage in all the time, and it's something that's kind of natural to us as language practicing animals, right? Why do we need to study it? Well, one reason is that skillful argumentation is difficult. It's not always easy to argue in a skillful and effective way. Secondly, more and more, and we can see this in politics, especially I think today, argumentation is a rare method. And yet, and we'll talk about this especially as the course goes on, it's a vital aspect of democracy. In order for democracies to function well, we need argumentation. We need transparent reasons for accepting claims. Because otherwise, again, you're exercising power and influence, coercion, rather than actual reasoning. Again, we don't want, in a democracy, you don't want the way things to function to be, give me your wallet or I'll shoot, right? You want, here's what I think, and here are the reasons for it. And so through this course, we're going to look at not only how to make effective arguments as a product, but also the larger process of argumentation. We'll look at argumentation as the production and exchange of messages, interaction with others. Sometimes we'll look at the message. We'll have a couple of projects that you can look at the course site through Canvas. And sometimes we'll look at the exchange or the interaction, and that's particularly true in the book. So the last thing I'll say before I just wrap up is that this is an introductory course. You are not required to have any training in argumentation prior to this class. You don't need to know anything about argument or argumentation before coming to this class. But it is nevertheless a complex course. It may be a somewhat challenging course because it introduces an analytical system. You're going to learn how to analyze arguments, right? If we, again, going back to that definition of argumentation as the study of effective reasoning, well, we're going to have a system to determine. It's going to introduce a system for determining whether an argument is effective or not. You'll also be introduced to a specialized vocabulary. Some of these will be terms you've maybe never heard before. Others will be terms like argument and rhetoric, persuasion that maybe you have heard before, but we're going to look at them in a different context. We're going to get different definitions of them than are maybe the popular definitions. And it's also going to provide a theoretical foundation, a way of looking at argument and argumentation in the world that will help you make decisions about argumentation in new contexts, in different situations. So finally, just as a way of wrapping up, two things. One, you can ask me questions about anything I cover in this lecture or any subsequent lecture, anything you read about, any of the materials we view in Canvas, through Canvas. If you go to the discussion board on Canvas, there's a pinned discussion at the top that allows you to ask questions, and I will respond to those questions. You can also, of course, email me at any point. The second is we use a textbook, The Creative Argument. It's a book that I wrote, and you will need this book in order to complete the course successfully. You can purchase the book online through Amazon. You can get it as a Kindle book or as a print book. You can also go to the publisher's website. That's if you just Google Hackett. Hackett is Hackett. Gershon, my last name, Girshin, and The Creative Argument. You can purchase the book directly from the publisher, and if you purchase it there, you can also get it as an ebook, and then you're not limited to the Kindle version if you don't have a Kindle. It's also on order through our bookstore, through the campus bookstore, I believe, as an ebook or as a print text. So you will need that book in time to do the next module. So if you don't have it already, hopefully you have it already. If not, get it as soon as you can. Again, contact me if you have any questions, and you can do that through our Canvas site. If you have any trouble navigating the Canvas site, please ask me about that as well. And I look forward to getting to know you through your work over the next few weeks. Thanks.